Easy English reading. The Old Captain. It was early afternoon, and the Sofala was leaving Batu Baru for Pangu, her next port of call. She had a clear course until about 3 in the morning, when she would hit the Pangu reefs. The deck was empty. All the passengers got off in Batu Baru. Mr. Stern, the mate, had the watch from 4 to 6. He was on the bridge. From 6 to 8, the Sarang, an old Malay, looked after the ship alone. At 8, Mr. Stern came back to take the watch again until midnight. Captain Wally did not come out in the evening. He had the night watch. He sat alone in his cabin, lost in sad thoughts. There was no hope left for him. His blindness grew worse every day. He had not yet seen a doctor who might have asked him who he was and what he was doing, but he understood quite well himself, even without a doctor. That was not all. He had to hide the terrible secret of his growing blindness from everyone around him. He had to do it for the sake of his only daughter, Ivy, and her 2 small children, and her invalid husband. She had to work hard, the poor woman, and her old father was her only help. Of course, it had not always been like this. There had been a time when he had earned quite a bit of money, and after his wife's death and his daughter's marriage, he had even bought himself a little bark, the Fair Maid. He was 67 then. He had been at sea all his life, and now he wanted the illusion that he was still the captain. He called his bark My Last Command. He did not make a lot of money on her, but he did have some money put away in the bank, and that was more than enough for his daughter and his own small needs. But that was all over now. Some years later, with the sudden failure of the bank, he had lost all his money, and the only thing that remained was the Fair Maid. For some time he had to work very hard again, carrying goods on his bark from island to island, to earn a little money for himself and his daughter. But he didn't earn enough. Soon after the bank failed, he received a very sad letter from his daughter. "My husband will never walk again," she wrote. She had decided to open a boarding house and asked her father to send her £200 to start. £200 to start! He had no idea where to get the money. After a sleepless night of meditation, Captain Whaley decided to sell the Fair Maid. It was the only way out. After selling the ship for £700, he sent £200 to his daughter, and with the remaining $500, he signed a 3-year contract with Mr. Massey, the owner and chief engineer of an old steamer, the Sofala. He became his partner and at the same time took over the command of the steamer for 3 years. At the end of that time, he could get his £500 back. But if he left the Sofala before the end of the agreement, or if the owner dismissed him for carelessness, he would get his $500 only in a year's time. If Captain Wally died, the whole £500 would go to his daughter. By the time our story begins, Captain Wally had been in command of the Sofala for 2 years and 11 months. He had made 36 voyages with her, and this was his last. Only 1 month remained before the end of the contract. His eyesight had been failing for the past few years, and he was sure that he would soon be completely blind. But he had to keep his command until the end of the last journey. All the time he thought about what Mr. Massey would do if he suddenly found out his secret. Surely Mr. Massey would fire him immediately and keep his money for a year. And it was Ivy's money, a whole year. How would he and his daughter and her family live for a year? They would not have a penny. The only thing to do was to hide this blindness from everyone on board. He had the Sarang, an old sailor he had had on his last ship, to keep the captain's watch. The Sarang knew the sea there better than anyone. He had been on these shores for 3 years. The captain lived in a state of fear. He was afraid to come out of his cabin. He was afraid to get up when he had sat down. He was afraid to raise his eyes to anyone's face. Who was that guy standing over there? What was that thing lying there? He was always afraid of falling over something or saying a fatal yes or no to a question. He had lived in this state of fear for several months, thinking only of his poor daughter and how he would get the money to her safely at the end of the last voyage. Now, just the day before, Massey had said he wanted to renew the contract with the captain. He had said he needed money to repair the steamer's boilers. He had evidently guessed that his partner was thinking of leaving him at the end of the time. He did not want to give him back the £500. The point was this. Massey had bought the Sofala a few years before with the money he had won in the Manila lottery. It had taken almost all the lottery money. Then he saw that he could not make much money with this old steamer. The Safara did not make much profit, and he spent everything he got on tickets for the Manila lottery. It was a kind of mania for him. If he won once, he was sure to win a second time, he thought, so he was always short of money and had a lot of trouble with the ship. Eventually, he began to hate the ship for all the trouble it caused him. Suddenly, Captain Wally heard the cabin door open. It was Massey. The owner came to the captain's chair. "So once more, Captain," he began, "will you continue to be my partner?" "You don't know what you're asking," came the quiet voice of the old captain. "I know what I want. I will try to get it once more. I don't think you are poor. I know you want to take out your £500 and leave me without a penny, and I must get new boilers for the ship as fast as I can. Oh, but remember, there is still time for me to dismiss you before the 3 years are up. Take care of yourself. Then you will have to wait a year for your money. What do you think, huh?" The captain was silent. Massey continued in an angry tone. "Why don't you speak? I can't get a word out of you. You don't seem to see me at all." Captain Wally did not raise his eyes, sitting very still in his chair. "I don't want you to go," Massey continued after another pause. "I want to renew the contract with you, and then you must find another £200 to help me with the new boilers. I don't think you don't have any money. I told you that before, Captain Wally. What do you do with your money?" "Mr. Massey," said Captain Wally, turning full upon him, "I can't do that. 3 years ago I saved you with that £500. Now you'll get nothing more from me, for the good reason that I have nothing more to give you. I am poor. I have told you that many times." "I don't believe you," Massey repeated angrily. "I am not a fool. Can't do it. Won't do it. You would take all my profits for nothing if you could." With these words, Massey jumped out of the cabin, slamming the door behind him. Captain Wally was left alone, sitting in his chair as quietly as before. What could he do? He had nothing of his own. He sent all his earnings to his daughter. Those £500 he would get at the end of the contract were Ivy's money. He would take it to her safely with his own hands, the last gift of an old blind father. Massey went directly to his cabin. There he sat down at the table and thought about his conversation with the old captain. He was very angry. How was he going to get the money? Suddenly a new thought occurred to him. The ship was fully insured. He had paid the premium. He hated that ship, which was nothing but trouble to him. How often he wished to see her at the bottom of the sea with the insurance money in his pocket. Why not use a trick to get rid of the ship? Let her sink. That would be a clever trick. Yes, but what of the risk? 6 bells struck the deck. 11. He got up, drank a glass of water, and sat down again for a few minutes to calm himself. Then he took his little lantern and left his cabin. Near the cabin, under the bridge, was a small storeroom with a lot of scrap iron in the corner. He went in, closed the door carefully behind him, and began to fill his pockets with various small pieces of iron. He filled his side pockets, then his breast pocket, and finished with the inside pocket. His plan was this. He remembered that it was possible to deflect the magnetic needle of a compass by placing pieces of iron near it. So why not put a lot of iron pieces into the pockets of his old coat, put the coat near the ship's compass, and wait for the consequences? He went back to his cabin and sat down to wait. When he heard 8 bells above his head, he rose and left the cabin. With the last of the bells, the serang appeared on the bridge to replace Stern, the mate. At the same time, Captain Wally came up on deck and sat down in a deck chair. As usual, he pretended to be on watch. It was a very dark night, but what did it matter? All nights were dark to him now. "Serang," he said half aloud. "Yes, Tuan, I am here." "Are there clouds in the sky?" "There are, Tuan." "Have her steered straight north." "She is heading north, Tuan." Suddenly Captain Wally heard Massey's footsteps on the bridge. Massey stopped behind the chair and said, "So you still say you must go?" "I must indeed." "And you could not at least leave me the money for a few years?" "I can't do that." "It would only save me," said Massey. "I have already saved you once." As they spoke, Massey took off his coat. He hung it on a hook near the compass. He stood in front of it for a few moments, hiding the compass from the quartermaster at the helm. Then he moved slowly away. As soon as he was gone, the quartermaster, the middle-aged Malay, saw with astonishment that in that short time, in calm waters with no wind at all, the ship had gone far off course. Massey had disappeared, but the iron in the pockets of his coat had done its work. The Sofala, heading north according to the compass that the iron had distorted, was no longer on the right course for Pangu Bay. The night was not only very dark, it was very still. As Massey sat in his cabin, he thought it was the best night for a spontaneous shipwreck. As soon as the ship hit one of the reefs east of Pangu, he would come up to the bridge, grab his coat, and throw it overboard. Who would know? They had all seen his coat hanging on the hook there many times. Still, he felt nervous. Waiting was the worst part. From time to time, in the stillness of the night, he heard the low voices of Captain Wally and the serang. "Tell me directly if you see any land, serang." "Yes, Tuan? Not yet?" "No, not yet," agreed Captain Wally. "We'll see land about 3:30. He sat and thought about his daughter. The last voyage would soon be over, and then he would go to her, see her, yes, see her face, for the last time. And then, even blind, he would live in the sound of her voice. He had been alone for too long. Suddenly, the serang approached him. "Tuan, do you see anything of the land?" The alarmed voice immediately brought Captain Wally to his feet. "See? What time is it?" he cried. 3:30, Tuan." "We are near it," he went on. "You must see it. Look! I say look!" What was it? I had steered exactly this course 36 times with the same compass. If anything was certain in this world, it was the absolute accuracy of the compass. What had happened then? Was the serang lying? Why did he lie? Did he go blind too? Is there a fog, serang? Look deep down in the water, deep down, I say. "Tuan, there is no mist. See for yourself." Should he stop the engines immediately and reveal himself? "Did you steer the course? Tell the truth." "Yes, Tuan, we are on course now. Look." Captain Whaley moved closer to the compass. To him it was now only a faint spot of light. But perhaps if he bent his face right down to the glass, he would see. Instinctively, he stretched out his arm to lean against something. His hand closed on Mr. Massey's coat. The loop broke and the coat fell, hitting the deck hard. "What's that?" Captain Wally fell to his knees. With trembling hands, he began to feel for the truth. Now everything was clear. Iron near the compass. Wrong course. He wanted to destroy her. His ship. Oh no, not that! "Stop her!" he shouted in a voice not his own. But at that moment, with tremendous force, the ship slammed into a reef. The shock was terrible. Everyone was thrown down. All the lights went out. There were crashes, loud cracks, and alarmed voices. The serang shouted, "No bottom!" Stern, the mate, shouted, "Where has she got to? Where are we?" Captain Wally answered in a calm voice, "Between the reefs." "Are you sure, sir? Then she will never come out again." "She'll be gone in 5 minutes," said the captain. "Boats, stern. Even one will save you all in this calm." There was a general rush to the boats. Captain Wally had not moved. He stood. He held Mr. Massey's coat in his hands. His thoughts were darker than they had been on the night of the loss of his last ship. Suddenly Massey came close and whispered in his ear, "Say nothing of it. I have the coat. Throw it away and come with me. You'll get 5 years for this shipwreck." "Have mercy," Massey whispered desperately. "Did you have any when you made me lose my ship? Mr. Massey, you will get 5 years for that." "I wanted money." "Listen, Captain, I will give you money. Take half of it. You love money yourself." The captain was silent. He did not move. Stern's voice could be heard below, giving orders. "Now then," he cried. "This way. Mr. Massey. Mr. Massey. Captain, quickly, sir." "I'll go to prison and you'll have nothing. The ship is lost and the insurance won't be paid," Massey went on, whispering. Captain Wally did not move. A thought flashed through his mind. It was true. All of Ivy's money was lost in that wreck. "Give me that coat," cried Massey hysterically. "No," said Captain Wally. "I will not give it to you. You'd better go. Don't wait, man, if you want to live. The ship is sinking. No, I will keep it, but I will stay on board." Massey did not seem to understand, but he ran down from the bridge. Captain Wally put down his coat and came to the side. "Are you all there? Is Mr. Massey with you?" he called into the night. Sterren called from the boat. "Yes, he is here. Come along, sir. It's madness to stay any longer." There was no reply from the ship. Captain Wally did not move. The ship was sinking fast. There was a horror of death in that old heart, but he thought of Ivy. She would get the 500 pounds, and if he was saved, nothing. Yes, he had to make this last sacrifice. "Captain Wally, jump, jump, you can swim," they cried below. There was no answer. Looking from the boat, they saw the Sofala, a black mass sinking rapidly into a black sea. No sound came from it. Slowly, slowly, the black outline changed, and where the ship had been a second ago, for a moment, there was something like a rock rising out of the sea. Then it disappeared too. The old captain had gone down with his sinking ship.